So like you guys, I've played a couple different TTRPGs before, but no matter what game system I'm currently playing, whether it be D&D, Pathfinder, Blades in the Dark, or Pokemon Tabletop Adventures, you name it, there are always these reoccurring issues that seem to be prevalent no matter what game system you're currently playing. So, let's talk about them. But before we do, hello, my name is Neyman and I'm a huge TTRPG nerd who happens to have a lot of Game Master experience. In this video, we're going to be talking about the most common challenges that everyone has to face when playing their favorite TTRPG of choice, regardless of the game system that you're currently using. So without further delay though, let's jump right in. So the first point that I want to talk about is one that I would argue to be the most common of these challenges, which is scheduling issues. Trying to find a good day and time frame to play your favorite TTRPG sounds pretty simple in theory, but actually planning it out and finding a day that works for 3 to 6 or more people can be pretty challenging. Especially if the people in your group are students or have different work schedules or are just in general really busy or are constantly moving around and changing schedules, it can be really difficult to find one day or maybe 1 or 2 days and times that really work for your group. And the best part about this challenge is that it's reoccurring, sometimes multiple times in one campaign, because schedules change, sometimes people move, or sometimes people just can't commit as much time as they used to playing the TTRPG that your group currently plays. And because of this, it could lead to your group having to completely reschedule your day and time in regards to playing your TTRPG. But let's say you don't have this issue and you manage to find a day and a time that works really great for your group and you manage to finally get together and play your very first session. But once you sit down and actually begin the game session, you might be running for new players, or you yourself might be a new player for your particular game system that you decided to play. And because of that, sometimes game systems have a lot of rules that go into being a player and interacting with the world around you. And of course, there's always the commitment, or the time commitment, I should say, in regards to showing up every single week or month or day, perhaps, for how long your particular campaign runs. Which isn't an issue in and of itself, but there are sometimes misconceptions, or should I say misunderstandings, in regards to what goes into playing your average TTRPG. Things like time commitment for when your sessions are, understanding the rules and being kind and courteous to your fellow players, and etc. So once you're there in your session and the game master or your fellow players are beginning to explain the game or explain the how long or how often you guys run these games and so forth, it can lead to sometimes players being overwhelmed and also confused in regards to the game itself. But once the session begins and your fellow players, your game master begins explaining the game, explaining the time commitment in regards to how long the sessions run for and how often they happen, as well as all the rules that go into playing the game, this can sometimes lead to players feeling overwhelmed and sometimes confused. And for some players, they may not like the density of the rules that some game systems have. Or if they're experienced players and you, being the GM, decided to homebrew a lot of new rules into the game, it can lead to some confusion on the player's side of things when you're implementing rules that technically aren't in the base rules for the game. Because of this, I would definitely recommend explaining to your players how often your game sessions happen, how long they are, and of course how rules dense the system that you're going to be using currently is, so that way the players know what they're getting themselves into. And of course, I would definitely recommend taking things slow at first and not overwhelm your players with an immense amount of rules right from the get-go. The players do not need to know all of the game rules in the very first session, or the first couple of sessions, or at all, really, because that's what rulebooks are for, right? Luckily, with most game systems, they have a beginner box adventure or an introductory adventure that does a good job of slowly teaching you and your players the rules in a way that's fun and makes sense. But if you're running a game that's strictly homebrew, then obviously you're creating everything yourself. But I would still recommend at least loosely modeling your homebrew adventure off the introductory adventure for your game system, because they normally do a great job of showcasing common rules while also making those first couple of sessions super fun. The reason why I say this is because those first couple of sessions for your campaign are crucial for hooking the attention of your players and bringing them into the game and getting them excited for each session. But if you fail to do that and players feel like your sessions are filled with less adventuring and being badasses and more page flipping and going over rules, then that's when the problem arises. Because some players may find that going to every single session isn't worth their time because they're not having very much fun, or they may find that they just have a limited amount of time each week to do free activities and they would rather do other things than play in your particular campaign. But a campaign can be perfect in literally every way imaginable, but still not be immune to this next issue, which is player absences. This is an issue that's pretty common at most tables because sometimes life just gets in the way, whether you be sick or you're super tired that day from work or school or whatever, or sometimes you just don't feel like playing that week. These are all very valid and common issues that arise that can lead to players being absent from a session or multiple sessions. Sometimes when you get back from work or class or just from having a very long day, you don't feel like sitting down with your friends and role-playing with them for 2+ hours when you could be sitting on your couch, kicking back and relaxing, watching YouTube, Netflix, or a football game that you missed and just turning your brain off and not having to worry about that kind of stuff, which is perfectly acceptable. And of course, player absences are not always caused by a lack of interest or fatigue or whatever. But because of the player being absent, it always leaves the game master with the sometimes unknowing choice of either pulling that player's character out of the game temporarily to keep things simple, or the game master lets another player pilot that character for a little bit, or the GM pilots that character, which just adds more to the GM's already very full plate, especially during a combat situation. And of course, player absences are not always caused by a lack of interest or fatigue or whatever, but because of the player being absent, it always leaves the game master with the sometimes unknowing choice of either pulling that player character from the game temporarily, or the game master just pilots that character themselves, which just adds more to the already very full plate that the game master has to deal with. And if there are multiple players absent for a particular session, then that puts the game master in another weird situation of having to decide to either cancel the session altogether or to pilot multiple player characters during a session. And if you have a very large group of, let's say, 5 or more players, that means you have to roleplay multiple player characters at the same time as you're roleplaying all the other NPCs and so forth. And sometimes it can lead to the kind of awkward situation where the players are just witnessing the game master roleplay with themselves for a little bit because they're roleplaying an NPC and a couple of different player characters at the same time. And the sad part about this is that there isn't really much you can do about player absences besides obviously going to their house and kidnapping them and forcing them to play D&D with you or whatever. But this is what leads me to my next point, because sometimes when the player is absent multiple times or for multiple sessions, I should say, this can sometimes be a sign of campaign burnout or campaign fatigue. This can be caused multiple ways. Perhaps the player feels like they're not being rewarded well enough for the quests that they complete. Perhaps the campaign is going on for too long. Or perhaps the players have lost interest in the campaign because they don't like the game system, the way the session is being ran, or perhaps the GM has just gotten tired of being the GM and the players can tell. Campaign fatigue is a real thing, and sometimes it can lead to the entire downfall of gaming groups. But the cool thing about this particular issue is that as opposed to with some of these other points I've talked about, this one can be remedied fairly easily. The first thing you do is obviously check in with everyone and make sure that they're enjoying the campaign and having a good time, including the game master. And yes, the game master needs to be checked in on as well, because the game master, at least in my opinion, is the most likely to get campaign fatigue out of anyone in the gaming group, because they're running every game session and they're planning out every game session, which is a lot of work. So it's important to check in on them, because maybe the GM is feeling burnt out, or perhaps the players feel like the campaign isn't going anywhere. These are all things that should be expressed to each other either at the beginning or end of a session, or via DMs in a group chat or something. After all, the game sessions are meant to be fun and not feel like a chore. So if your game master is looking a little burnt out, offer to run a session or two to give them a little break so that way they can rekindle that flame and passion for running the game. Or if your players are acting a little disinterested during the sessions or campaign, maybe spice things up in the campaign and introduce a new villain or helpful NPC or wacky sidekick or something. Or ask them what are their thoughts on the campaign, so that way you can better adapt each session to make them more fun for everyone. But of course, everyone has different ideas of what fun is when playing a game, especially a TTRPG. Some players really like combat and the min-maxing therein. Some players really like to be chaotic little gremlins and cause chaos wherever they go. And some players really like to learn about the lore of the world that the game master is currently running for them, and so forth. But this is what leads me to my last point, which is trying to balance the many different types of playstyles that every player has in a game session. And yes, when I say player, I also mean the game master. Perhaps some of you guys have experienced this before, but sometimes when you sit down at the table and begin playing a TTRPG, whether it be with your friends or strangers, it can be a little difficult at first to try to gauge or get an idea of what everyone's playstyle is. What's nice is that sometimes players like to be very outspoken in regards to what type of a playstyle they're going for, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes it can be really not fun when you're a player who really likes puzzles or role-playing or those kinds of things, and you're constantly having to wait to get to the next dungeon or the next encounter because you're waiting on your party member, Stabby McStab-Your-Face, to finish up whatever sort of shenanigans he's getting up to. So trying to find a good balance between everyone's playstyles can be pretty tricky, especially during the first couple of sessions when you're trying to figure out what everyone's playstyle is. So the best way that I've found to remedy this is by being upfront with everyone with what type of a playstyle you're going for. And I've found that the best time to do this is during a session 0 or at the beginning of your first session. sometimes game masters like to ask these kinds of questions, or whoever is running a particular campaign likes to ask these kinds of questions during a session 0 or at the beginning of the campaign or what have you. But of course, every game master is going to be different, and of course, sometimes we just plainly forget to ask. Are you not going to show up to a session or need to reschedule because Friday evenings don't work anymore for you? Then let your group know. Do you feel like you're not having as much fun in the campaign as you used to? Well then just let your game master or your fellow players know so that way they can help you out. Game sessions are meant to be fun. And while all of these issues are fairly common with every single TTRPG group, they can be remedied in one way or another. And normally, or at least in my experience, that remedy involves being vocal and communicating with the people in your gaming group. But with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider leaving a like and a comment down below in regards to some of your thoughts on the video and some of the points that I made in it. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be sure to catch you. Okay, sorry about that, past Nate. Hello guys, future Nate here. I just wanted to thank you so much for helping me get to 500 subscribers. I know it doesn't seem like a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but it's really cool, and it seems crazy to me that there's 500 of you out there who enjoy my videos, who aren't me or my friends. But anyways, everybody, thank you so much for watching my videos and enjoying them, and I hope to continue making more of them. And sorry for the delay with this video, and I know there's not like a due date for my videos or whatever, but I like to release one a week at least. But I recently went back to school, and so because of that, my free time has gotten slowly taken away from me because of studying and schoolwork and just regular work and stuff like that. But I hope to continue making these videos, and hopefully you guys continue to enjoy them. But just want to explain myself, and obviously thank you all again so much for subscribing and getting me to 500 subscribers. And it's really humbling, and it's awesome to see all you guys here and see this community slowly grow. But anyways, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.